Welcome back, class! Now, I've always thought a good history teacher is somebody that's able to complicate an issue. Not make something more complicated where you can't understand it, but take a simple issue and show you that it's a lot more complicated than you think. So, I'm starting a new segment called DeBetts Club, where we'll take a topic that you might have thought was pretty cut and dry and show you how it's a little bit more complicated than it is. Today, we're going to ask, did Parliament have the right to tax the colonies? And since I need milk, we're going for a walk. Okay, the colonies were making a big fuss saying that it was totally illegal and unfair and violated their rights as an Englishman to be taxed without their consent or without having their own representation in Parliament. I know it's gonna sound un-American, but that's completely untrue. First, the idea that somebody has to give their consent in order to be taxed is inherently flawed. If that was the case, no one would ever pay taxes. You know what they call it when you only pay the taxes you want to pay? Charity. And the colonies said, well, we don't have our own representatives in Parliament. Well, neither does anybody else. British Parliament worked for the good of all of Great Britain and not just the people that put them there. I realize that that's a little bit of a naive argument, but let's look at it this way. The cities of Manchester and Birmingham, two of the most populated and richest cities at the time, they didn't have their own representatives. Should they not be taxes? No, that would be insane. Frankly, it's kind of insulting that the colonists think that Parliament doesn't have their best interests in mind. This is especially true when it comes to matters of protection. I mean, the American leaders that were talking smack about the Stamp Act, they must have awfully short memories, especially when it comes to a little something called, I don't know, the French and Indian War, which they started. And they wasted no time in asking the mother country for help. And not only did England help, but they came in with troops, won the war, acquired new land, and provided security and protection. If a power protects you, I think it's only logical that they expect a little obedience and maybe a little money back. Now, some people had suggested, well, why don't the colonies just be left to tax themselves? And while that would have been a nice idea, a lot of the leaders of the colonies had time and time again proven themselves dishonest and disloyal to the crown. How can they possibly be left to tax themselves? Ooh, milk. Find the milk, find the milk, find the milk. That milk. 11. Looks like it's 11. Lastly, this seemed like a lot of fuss over a tax that basically is 1/3 of one day's pay. And let's remember that the average American colonist was a loyal British subject that wanted to help the country that nurtured and protected them. The complainers were selfish and at times criminal. They terrorized these good, loyal subjects. And a lawless and self-centered tiny minority of colonists wasn't going to tell Parliament what it could tax and what it couldn't. I could be wrong. Let's pay for this milk and see if maybe I can see it the other way. Oh, heck no. Parliament had no right to be passing these new taxes. Okay, yes, you have to understand that the whole purpose of having colonies is to make money. I gotta put my sunglasses on. Goods were coming in and out, and as part of the British Empire, taxes on imports and exports were to be expected. But it's through the direct and indirect taxation that the crown went way too far. Many of the new taxes, like the Stamp Act, they had no other purpose than to take money away from the colonists. The money wasn't being used to protect ships from foreign powers or create new harbors. It was being used for Parliament to grow rich again. Worse still was the fact that the colonies were given no say in their creation. Consent might have been given if the colonies had representation in Parliament, but sadly, no. The right to have a representative speak on your behalf is a needed and fundamental right of law. And the colonists just agreed that as Englishmen, they wanted to be treated as such. Now, while it might be true that other large British cities didn't have representatives, yeah, they also didn't have 3,000 miles between them and Parliament. The argument doesn't stand. And the reason they didn't have representatives is because their representatives didn't win elections. The colonies were never even given the opportunity. And many of those living in these unrepresented cities, well, yeah, they got relatives and friends in Parliament that are still looking out for them. The colonies didn't. Not a single representative in England might be immediately affected by a tax in America. Oh yeah, and Parliament needs to stop playing the French and Indian War card, because the colonies, they didn't just stand by. Old Ben Franklin reported that during the conflict, the colonies supplied 25,000 troops and raised millions. Very little of this was paid back by Parliament. If anything, Britain actually owed the colonies for protecting Britain and not the other way around. The colonies should never have had to pay the Stamp Act or any other tax that Parliament came up with. And when Ben Franklin was asked during a visit to Parliament, he added, "They'll never do it unless they are compelled by force." Well, we all know how that ended up. Well, I got my milk, I got my coffee, and hopefully I was able to make this issue a little bit more complex for you. So, Where do you stand? Do you think that Parliament had the right to tax the colonists, or do you think that the colonists were right in saying no taxation without representation? Let me know in the comments. Let me know what you think about DeBetts Club, what topics you'd like to see, if you're an educator, what topics you'd like to debate, whether it was too shaky, anything. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, and you can follow me on Twitter at MrBettsClass. Be safe, and I'll see you next time.